Good morning, Husker fans. Welcome back to the Husker Big Red YouTube channel. I'm Chris Peterson, and joining me as always is Danny Gillette, and we're back for another episode of the podcast here after a rough weekend for Nebraska basketball, where their bubble for the NCAA tournament may have burst, but it was a strong weekend for the Huskers at the Combine, and we also got some recruiting notes, so we're going to cover all that. So before we do, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, get into the comments section. And Danny, how are you doing on this Monday morning?
More awake than the basketball team, I'll say that much.
Yeah, they did not show up on Saturday, so let's get started right there. In a game where they really needed to win, it was a must-win game. People use that a lot, but this really was a must-win game for Nebraska. 7.5-point favorites, and they found themselves down by 16 points. They were totally flat. Fred Hoiberg kind of called them out after the game, even, basically saying that, it's just really frustrating that there's no sense of urgency, and, you have these really important games on the line, and they aren't playing, I guess, with that urgency until, as he said, it was too late. And he showed some frustration with some of the media members after the game. But, I think he was more frustrated with his team. And it's hard to blame him after that performance on Saturday because, if they show up and play Nebraska basketball for 40 minutes, they win that game.
Yeah, I mean, they held Dawson Garcia in check for pretty much most of the game, and they still couldn't figure out a way to get things done. And, this has been a theme throughout the entire season. Fall behind, by large margins early, and then, Northwestern, they were lucky to be able to come back. Penn State, they couldn't do it. And, I get maybe falling behind to Penn State Northwestern, and then having even a rough game against Penn State, which in my opinion is when the wheels really started falling off. But to come out on Saturday like they did against Minnesota, that was absolutely pathetic. I mean, that was pathetic basketball. They looked like they didn't want to be there. They looked disorganized, and the defensive intensity wasn't there. It looked like everybody was going through the motions, with the exception of Bryce Williams, who by this point is running on fumes because he's been, carrying this team along with Juwan Gary. And, so, this was really a pathetic effort on Saturday. And, I don't think the blame lies solely on one player or one performance as much as the whole entire team. I mean, this team looks lost right now.
Yeah, it's just really hard to fathom. I mean, they went on that great run to get back in the NCAA tournament mix. They were solidly in the mix, and now they've lost 4 out of their last 5 games. And 3 of them have been at home. I mean, they've lost 4 out of their last 6 games at home. And that, to me, is the biggest indictment of this program. And it's not, you look at the teams they've lost to: Rutgers, USC, Minnesota. These aren't teams that are going to the NCAA tournament. So all Nebraska literally had to do to make the tournament was beat 3 non-tournament teams at home, and they couldn't do it. I mean, I know they lost to Michigan at home too, but still, I think John Rothstein, put out that tweet last month, the CBS sports basketball analyst, like, hey, Nebraska just has to win these home games to get it done. And they didn't even have to win all those games because they stuck out a couple of road wins. So all they had to do was really beat Rutgers and Minnesota, beat all these, below 500 teams in conference play at home. And, the fact that they weren't able to do it, I mean, that is a pretty shocking indictment for this team. And, I know right now they're still projected to make the tournament according to ESPN, but they're like the last team in. And, I think there's a few ways they can still make it. I think they need to either win their next 3 games, which is, win 2 in the conference, the last 2 conference games, and win 1 in the Big Ten tournament. Or they're going to have to go 1-1 and probably win at least 2 games in the Big Ten tournament. So if they, beat Iowa, which they actually have to do to make the Big Ten tournament, if they lose to Ohio State and Iowa, they might not even make it to Indianapolis. And, if that happens, people are talking about the NIT. They may not even get to the NIT. Like, if you don't even make it to the Big Ten tournament, I don't know that you're going to get an NIT invite because it's not as easy as it used to be to get to the NIT. So, I mean, I don't know. It's kind of a drastic drop off for where this team was. And, yeah, it's just really disappointing. The last possession, you get, I thought was a microcosm of the whole game. You get the bucket, you get the lead, and then you come back down and you give up a wide open 3. It's not like it was a contested, it was a tough shot. The dude was wide open in the corner. And it's the same things we've seen all season. These guys do not communicate well. They do not communicate in transition defense, even in their half-court defense. How many times early in the second half or in the first half even did Minnesota shooters get wide open attempts from 3, just wide open? And you just can't do that. And beyond that, they missed 9 free throws, which was driving me absolutely bonkers. And I knew it was going to come back to haunt them when it did. So, I mean, they keep shooting themselves in the foot. And it just, I don't know. That last sequence drove me crazy, though. Like, how does every single player on that team not find someone to guard and make sure, like, hey, if we're going to lose, at least make it be like a contested shot? Like, they gave up a catch and shoot corner three that was wide. Like, that's one of the easiest shots to hit from three-pointer in basketball, from the three-point range in basketball. So it's disappointing to me that the shot that Minnesota had to hit was just a routine shot. It like wasn't even difficult. And so
I knew it
don't
was
know.
coming though, because that's the way every single Nebraska sport ends. So I knew somehow, some way that Minnesota was going to come down and get points, and that's not even being funny. Like I knew, like because they looked disheveled the whole game, disorganized, disheveled, whatever you want to call it. And so I knew all Minnesota had to do was, go down the court, not even the full way, and get a wide open look, because again they struggle with transition, and it was just, and the fact that they had to, expend so much energy coming back from 20 points. I mean, that in itself, they shouldn't even have been in that way in the process in the first place. They looked sleepy. They looked, kind of like they didn't want to be there in the first half, and they played much better in the second half. But I mean, how many times have we seen in first halves they just have not come, ready to play, or at least energized to play?
Yeah, I mean, you look at three. I mean, really, outside the Michigan game's the only one in the last 5 games where they haven't fallen behind by at least 10 points. Because I'm pretty sure they were down.
Awful.
Yeah, Michigan, shot the ball terribly. Maybe not against Maryland. I think they did get down by at least 10 points in that one, at least by like 8 or 9. And I don't know what it is with this team, but the committee is looking at how you've performed in your last 10 games, and this team has performed terribly. I mean, they've fallen behind by at least 16 points now to Maryland. Minnesota, Northwestern, and Penn State, 3 of the worst teams in the conference. I mean, and that to me, that was the most frustrating thing. It was like, okay, now we're going to turn it on in the second half when we get down by 16 points. And, it's like if you had started the game this way, you probably would have been over by halftime in your favor, and so it's really frustrating to sit there and just, feel like you missed some opportunities, but I guess it's still there for him. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how they're going to flip the script and go win in Columbus this week. And I'm worried about that Iowa game because Iowa's trying to get into the Big Ten tournament too. So like, yeah, it's a scary time. I know people are talking about Fred. Should Fred get fired? And I think that's way too drastic. I mean, Nebraska hasn't made back-to-back trips to the NCAA tournament for 30 years. So it's not like this is a yearly expectation. It's not that it's not a disappointment. If they don't make it, it will be. And I think Fred Hoiberg would be the first one to tell you that. But I also think he's still the best guy for the job. And
I agree.
I just think this is what Nebraska basketball is going to be going forward is, this team that's going to be, on the bubble every year. And, maybe they can get to a Sweet 16 at some point. Maybe they can win a game in this tournament in the Big Dance at some point. But you just got to keep getting there. And they still have a chance. They still have games to play. But it's not looking great right now.
Someone suggested to fold the basketball program for an ice hockey program, and honestly, that would be kind of cool. I'd love some Nebraska Cornhuskers ice hockey. I love Big Ten hockey. I love college hockey, so that would be awesome. But no, all joking aside, it's tough because I do think Fred's the guy for the job, but boy, is he hard to defend over these last couple of weeks. It's been a little bit of rough sledding here, so I don't know. I mean, and again, we've seen this team. They started off, really hot with the Diamond Head Classic. They struggled in the middle of January. They got hot again, and now they're in a bit of a lull, to say the least. So it's like, which team are we going to see? The inconsistency is driving me absolutely crazy with this team because they should be a lot better than they are.
Yeah, I mean they do seem to play their best when their backs are against the wall, and their backs are against the wall now. So we'll see. But if they can make up for this loss with the win in Columbus. If they win in Columbus, then I think they set up a win against Iowa and then a win in the Big Ten tournament to go to the NCAA tournament. So I mean it's still very doable if they can win these next 3 games and get to 20 wins. I know that sounds crazy, but like we saw them lose 6 in a row, and then all of a sudden they beat Illinois and Oregon and all these other teams. So like they are very capable, and maybe this will shock them back to life because if they're not looking at their, Juwan Gary and Bryce Williams, like they may not get more than 2 games. These next 2 games made the last 2 games of their career at Nebraska. So they need to really think about that. And is the effort that they want on Sunday, is that what they want their Nebraska career to be remembered by? I don't think so. Like, I really don't think so. Sam Hoiberg, these guys have a lot of pride, and I don't know why that they haven't shown, a lot of fight, at least, or urgency. I mean, not fight. These guys fought on Sunday, or on Saturday, but just no urgency. And so that Ohio State game is probably going to be the gut check moment for this program. You go in and win in Columbus, then you're probably going to make the NCAA tournament. If you don't, you might not even make it to Indy. So, we'll see what happens, but it's gut check time for Nebraska.
It was good to see Connor Estigian kind of hit a couple threes to get himself rolling again, but he's been another frustrating player. He just hasn't seemed to be able to find his groove consistently, and he was supposed to be this knockdown three-point shooter, and he hasn't been that of late. I mean, again, he did do a little bit better job on Saturday, but I mean, if he were able to step up as a consistent third scorer, I think the outlook for this team changes drastically.
Yeah, or this team would be much different if they had Rink Mast. They would be, I think they'd probably already be in double-digit wins in terms of the Big Ten, because they just don't have anybody. Rink was just so good in the ball screen game. For one, you could have him and Bryce Williams, playing a 2-man game where, Bryce is hitting those mid-range shots. And if, teams are kind of doubling him, he can pop it out to Mast for that 3. How many times did we see him shoot that shot last year, or score in the post, or create shots for people? And
we'll see next year, not with this roster, but
yeah, I mean, it's disappointing, because those 3 guys would have been a really, that's a good trio that you could build around. And it seems like they've been trying to find that third guy every game. Sometimes it's Connor, sometimes it's Andrew Morgan, sometimes it's nobody. And when that happens, kind of like on Saturday, they lose.
Yeah.
So,
Berkey looks legitimately confused. Sorry, Berkey looks legitimately confused. Like, there were stretches on Saturday when it looked like he didn't know how to play basketball, period. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know
what's going on with him, but I don't know if you felt the same way. I don't want to speak for you, but I mean, he looks to me legitimately confused at some stretches on the court right now. Like, he forgot how to play basketball. The Monstars stole his powers.
Yeah, well, he was hurt. I don't know I'm not sure what's up with him, but if Fred could untap his potential, I mean, he's the guy, I think, of the guys coming back that, he probably has like the brightest, I mean, not counting Rink Mast, obviously, but just the guys on this current team that are going to be back. I think he's the one that has the biggest upside in terms of what he could be as a player. So I don't know. There's a lot of untapped potential there. Nebraska could have a really good front court, but they're going to have to do some work in the portal, finding guys at the back court. And, we'll see how that works out. They're going to have to
pony up the money, because I don't know, how many in-state kids want to come here. I mean, we looked at the graphic like a couple months ago. All the kids that have left or gone to other programs, they're going to have to put money where their mouth is, truthfully, because I don't see it any other way.
Yeah, no, they definitely will. And that's hopefully Troy Dannon has the money cannons ready, because you need it in basketball, like, for sure. As much as you need it for football, you need it in basketball to get those 1 or 2 players that make all the difference in the world. And Nebraska's losing 2 big difference makers off this team. So, and we're getting 1 in Rink Mast, which is good, but got to find a couple other ones if this team wants to go dancing again. So we'll see.
And Troy Dannon's been showing that he can fire off the money cannons when needed, so that's at least a positive sign.
And so let's switch topics to football here. It was an interesting weekend, or past few days, for Nebraska football at the Combine, and they've kind of not stolen the show, but there's been some guys that really have put out some outstanding performances, starting with Ty Robinson, who measured 6'5", 288 pounds, and then ran a 4.83 in the 40, which was the best time among defensive tackles. It was I think it was one of the top 20 times among defensive tackles, like in the last 10 or 20. I can't remember what it was, but at any rate, Ty Robinson, definitely made himself some money. Like, how early do you think he can go in the NFL draft in April?
Honestly, I'm thinking early to mid second round, because when you look at the need for defensive tackles around the league, I think he could definitely fit there. And it was impressive how much weight he lost between the last game he played and the Combine too. I mean, I think it really helped his movement, and he put on a really good showing, so good for him.
Yeah, I think day 2 pick to me. I mean, second round pick, it would shock me if he made it past the second round, because like Ty Robinson, for one thing, I think he proved at Nebraska, he's a solid run defender. Like, the guy can play well against the run, and then he's got 12 career sacks. I don't think people realize that, but he had 7 sacks last season. He also when a lot of guys are opting out of bowl games, he wanted to play in the Pinstripe Bowl. And if there was anybody on this team that had the right to opt out of the Pinstripe Bowl because they actually have like a bright NFL future, it was Ty Robinson, and he goes and has a sack in that game. And so, like, I know that might not do wonders for his draft stock, but some team is going to fall in love with him because of that, and they're going to get a great player. And I feel like he could be a 5 technique, he could be a big defensive end for the right team, and he can rush the passer inside, he can rush the passer outside. He just has a lot of versatility, and somebody's going to get a really good player, I think, in Ty Robinson. But I feel like there could be 5 Nebraska football players drafted, which would be the most in a long time. You have Isaiah Nair, who put on a really good performance as well.
Honestly, that was a little bit frustrating. I'm not even gonna lie, that was a little bit frustrating.
I think it was all frustrating. I mean, and then Thomas Fidone. I mean, they even had one. I can't remember who it was. One NFL analyst compared him to the Terminator, said he looked like the Terminator, and it was like, okay, but he didn't play like that at Nebraska. And I understand he had the injuries and stuff, and I do think there is, I think that Fidone played better than some Nebraska fans give him credit for. Because if you talk to some, he was like the worst tight end of all time, and he was a really good player, but he also wasn't like an all Big Ten player either, which is what I thought he was going to be. Now, maybe he'll be better. Like maybe he'll get, used. But I don't know. He did make some interesting comments. He's like, I know what kind of player I am when I get the ball. He said that when he was interviewed at the Combine, when he was asked like why he didn't come back to Nebraska, because I think he could have came back. I think he would have been a valuable piece for this team next season. But I do think he's going to get drafted. I don't think it's going to be like the second day. I think that's way too early. But day 3, like 4th round, yeah, I definitely see Thomas coming off the round, like 4th, 5th round coming off the board.
Yeah, no, those comments were definitely interesting. I mean, but Nair was the most frustrating. I mean, he tested really, really, really well, and yet he couldn't catch the ball against Iowa. So who the hell knows? Maybe he made the right choice going to the draft. I thought it was a little premature, but you look at the NFL Combine as a whole and what it did for a guy like Cam Jurgens and how it really rose his stock. So maybe this is what a guy like Nair and a guy like Fidone needs.
Yeah, it was interesting to see. And I thought the same thing when he was catching the balls in the individual drills. Like, why didn't you catch that one against Iowa? But I mean, it's fine. I think with the way the receiving corps set up,
much conviction for catching the ball against Illinois.
But I mean, I don't think he really would have had a place with Nebraska next season anyway. With Dane Key and Isaiah Hunter and all these other guys. So I think it worked out for everybody. Fidone, I think, could have, but we'll see. It's whatever. I think he's a better blocker too, and tight ends can play a lot in the NFL, like special teams. They're the new fullback essentially. So I think he'll find his way into the league. I think Nash Hutmaker is going to get drafted, probably going to be on day 3, but as a backup defensive tackle, I think he's got a lot of value, and a guy that can be like a true nose tackle, because there aren't that many nose tackle types in the NFL anymore, especially guys that can really load up and stuff the run. I know it's all about rushing the passer and yada, yada, yada. But you know what? Like, to rush the passer, you got to stop the run. And, I know my Green Bay Packers can certainly use a guy like Nash Hutmaker, clogging up the middle. So I definitely think like day 3, I think he's going to come off the board. And I'm kind of surprised he didn't get invited to the Combine, actually.
I was just going to say the same thing. I am a little bit surprised that he didn't get invited, but I think whoever, takes a chance on him is going to get a steal. And, the more I think about Fidone, honestly, when you look at the tight end class, it's not the strongest. So I think maybe that factored into it too, because I bet he did his research on that end too. It's a little bit lighter on the tight end front. So maybe this was a good, opportunity for him to try to see what he could do in the NFL. But overall, very interesting weekend. It said a lot about the Nebraska strength and conditioning department in a positive way. I think they all did really well, and it was, kind of bittersweet, because it was a lot of what could have been at Nebraska. But as is the case, once you leave Nebraska, you tend to do a little bit better.
It was good. Yeah, it was a good weekend for the strength and conditioning guys, Corey Campbell. Yeah. So that was good for them to see. And honestly, it is a good day. I know it is bittersweet, like to see Fidone and Nair, doing so well, but it will help this program if there's like 5 guys drafted in April. Like that's something that they can start selling to recruits, and that'll be the most in. I can't remember. I read they had 4. I want to say like 2016 or maybe 2018, but if they get 5, I think that would be a pretty solid number. Tommy Hill didn't work out at the combine. He was there. And it was interesting because Travis Hunter in his combine interview said that Tommy Hill was actually one of the most difficult cornerbacks he faced this season. He didn't say him by name. He said the guy from Nebraska, but we all know who he was talking about. So I think if Tommy Hill can run, he's going to try to do it at the pro day. If he can run and, show that he's healthy in those movement drills, he's obviously not going to be a first-round pick like he was projected, but I do think that he'll get drafted. It's going to be on day 3. It might not be till the 6th or 7th round. But, man, somebody could be getting a steal with this guy because if he's healthy, he has played like a first-round pick. So
now that's a guy that I legitimately feel bad for and how his Nebraska career ended because he was on a track to be really, really good, and he was really, really good. And, and just to have that injury flare up at the worst time, and he played really well in that Colorado game. And so Travis Hunter was definitely right there, but he had the pick 6, I think it was. So, that was just that wasn't a frustrating kind of negative thing. That was just frustrating and sad to see how it ended. But I'm hoping he can latch on to a team somewhere. And I know my Patriots had talked to him and stuff like that. So I don't know. We'll see. It'll be interesting. But I do think this group of players has a lot of untapped potential for the NFL. And I think it's really, really exciting that, a guy like Ty Robinson under Matt Rule's leadership is, getting buzz at the NFL Combine. I think that sets a good precedent, moving forward.
Yeah, definitely. You want players want to get to the playoff and they want to get to the NFL. And Nebraska's, getting closer on the win side of things, getting more competitive and getting more guys drafted. That's going to help you get better players and help you get to the playoffs. So it's all connected. One layer.
Look at our future wide receiver room. I think our future wide receiver room and our future quarterback room, and I think we might see some more combine invites down the road.
Yeah, and Emmett Johnson too. Let's see what this guy can do. Yeah. I am excited to see what Emmett can do, kind of, as the true RB1, because he never really has gotten the chance to be that for a full season. So we'll see. And speaking of, that and some other recruiting notes, last week we were talking about, CJ Brona, the Nebraska cornerback who was upgraded to a 4-star. He was unranked when Nebraska got his commitment. And, of course, that caused some grumbling among fans. But it was like, look, this guy is going to be a blue chip prospect. Now he is. And I said last week to watch out for some flip attempts. Well, we've already got one as Oregon has come in with an offer last week. I don't know that there hasn't been any talk about like visits or anything like that. So it doesn't seem like anything to worry about too much, but I'm sure there's going to be other teams, on the radar of CJ Brona. He does have that official visit set up. So I think Nebraska is in a good spot, but always worrying when teams like Oregon and I'm sure some others like Georgia and Alabama will start offering soon. So that's always a little bit worrisome for a Nebraska commitment.
It is worrisome, but at the same time, you can buy a guy out of the transfer portal. So, I mean, it is so this is an interesting dynamic because you do worry about losing recruits and stuff, but now it's almost like you can patch up, your losses in the transfer portal as long as you have the cash and, the money to spend and things like that. So it's kind of interesting because the transfer portal, I think, takes away from high school recruiting. Not to go down this rabbit hole, but now I wouldn't like to lose a guy like Brona, but at the same time, I think with players entering the portal so much and things like that, if we really needed a corner, we could probably go and get one now. I mean, and I probably wouldn't have said that last year due to Matt Rule's love for developing high school players, but based off the transfer portal haul he had this year and his willingness to utilize it, and Troy Dannon's willingness again to open up his checkbook, it's kind of created this new dynamic for the program in terms of recruiting, and honestly makes the losses, in my opinion, sting a little bit less.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that's true. Hopefully they can keep Brona in the fold, because like I said, I think he's going to be. I think his rise in the rankings is just beginning. I think he's actually one of the best cornerbacks in this class. So hopefully, they can keep him in the fold. But you're right. The high school recruiting is not the end all be all that it used to be. So
now
you can get other guys in the portal, but yeah, go ahead.
If there is a position where I want them to really focus on in high school recruiting, it's offensive line, like tackle and things like that, because those are a premium position in the portal and a lot harder to get.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of some of those premium positions, offensive tackle, there's a couple other guys that are be coming in for visits. But another name kind of on the offensive tackle board for the 2026 class is Hayden Ainsworth, who was a 2027 recruit, just reclassified. Ole Miss is like he's got a 95% chance with the on-3 prediction machine, so they're the favorite. But Nebraska is also, listed as one of the top teams. I'm a front runner according to Steve Wiltfong of On3. So that's another name to know. They're in the mix with a lot of offensive tackles. It broke my heart that they kind of fell off with Jackson Cantwell, but Hayden Ainsworth, another name to know for 2026 offensive tackle recruiting.
Yeah, I'm not surprised with Cantwell. I mean, he's such a dynamic player, and obviously the bigger teams are going to come calling, but they do have a lot of feelers out for offensive tackles. So I'm kind of glad that they're really focusing on that position at the high school level, because like I said, I think there's a premium for those types of positions in the portal. And if you really wanted to focus your high school efforts on positions, it's the offensive line. And I think Deacon Schmidt is a guy to watch. Nebraska made his top 8 on Sunday, and it's going to be a tight recruitment. He has Tennessee, Oklahoma, Alabama in his top 8. He's the 30th overall interior offensive lineman in the 2026 class, and the second overall player in the state of Colorado. And Colorado is a little bit interesting because they also, are being connected to tight end Camden Jensen, who is from Colorado. So they're doing some work out there. And so, yeah, I'll be interested to see how their offensive line board shapes out and looks. And to me, I think tackle and offensive line are going to be very important this recruiting cycle.
Yeah, offensive tackle, I think, is probably one of the number one priorities, just based on what they've brought in the past few classes and kind of what they need at some of those positions. So yeah, there are some really big names, to keep an eye on. They haven't, like Kevin Obot is one name I'm watching. Mm-hmm. I haven't seen him set an official visit yet. Rex Waterman has, so it's kind of something to keep an eye on there. But yeah, and Rex Waterman's going to visit twice. He's going to visit April 5th and then also June 6th. So that tells you kind of where he is on the Nebraska tackle board. But
he's a sneaky under the radar type of guy. I like him.
Yeah, I do too. And Michigan and Notre Dame, a bunch of other programs are kind of sniffing around there. So even though the offer sheet isn't super impressive right now, he's one of those late risers, that you're always talking about. Jamal Rule, we talked about him a little bit. He's going to take an official visit. So North Carolina State and Nebraska are kind of the top 2 teams there. And then Dayton Raiola is the other official visitor. He's going to be taking his official visit on the weekend of June 20th with Stephen Walker, Ryan Mosley, Camden Jensen, Lincoln Watkins. So that weekend is kind of being built up as a big recruiting weekend. And I just think that solidifies again that, Dayton Raiola is going to be, the 2026 quarterback for Nebraska, and that's probably not going to change.
Say it louder, please, because I'm sure we're going to have a lot of questions in regards to that moving forward. But Stephen Walker is really, really interesting because I love him. He's an explosive running back. They definitely need more running back depth for the future, so at least making a strong impression on him that weekend is going to be important.
And then just kind of looking at some other guys, Trey Taylor is going to be visiting again. I think some point during the spring. I was going to say the spring game, but obviously not having a spring game. Sometime this spring, and then hopefully they can get him back because he's talking about making a decision this summer. So like I said before, I think Nebraska is very high up in the mix with Trey Taylor, but we'll see what happens after these last couple of visits. But I would say Nebraska is at least in the top 2 or 3.
Which is why I think Nebraska didn't offer Tamalia. I know there was a lot of fan controversy on that, but I think they're not necessarily banking on, but I think they're pushing all their chips towards Trey Taylor, and I think that's a good move. He's a really talented quarterback, and he's also out of the Midwest, so that would help the Midwest pipeline, the Illinois pipeline in particular, because there's a lot of good players that are coming out of the Chicago, Illinois area right now.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how much NIL is a factor there, because
Mhm.
Michigan's involved and they've shown that they're willing to pay for quarterbacks. Notre Dame, I think LSU is also in the mix. So
Yep. Yep.
there's some pretty big programs there. So we'll see how that all works out. But I know, yeah, there's going to be some people are going to be mad about the Jeff Tamalia thing, and like that's a comparison Nebraska, the coaching staff's going to have to live with over the next few years. I mean, but they have made their decision. I mean, obviously, like it's not like they didn't know Jeff Tamalia didn't exist. They knew him, they evaluated him, and they just feel that Dayton Raiola has a better future. And who's to say that they're right or wrong? I mean, I feel like it's more of probably a projection with Dayton Raiola, but he's playing at a really great program. He's taken all the steps. You look at his physical development, it's night and day from where he was a couple of years ago. And so I feel like that they just believe in their heart of hearts that, he's going to be a better quarterback than Jeff Tamalia, that there's more upside, that there's more there to him than, what the rankings say. So, Nebraska doesn't really care about the rankings that much. I don't think Matt Rule, frankly, gives two craps about what the rankings say. We've seen that with his
Which is
offers
honestly a
and
good
other.
thing because I don't really like the rankings either. But go ahead. Sorry.
No, I mean, you're right. I don't think that you need, the rankings are overrated. I mean, it's not you all the time. You see guys that are super highly rated recruits that end up doing nothing in high school. So, I mean, you want to talk, or I mean, in college, you want to talk about like, a roll of the dice. I mean, I would say high school recruiting is even more inexact than
Right.
the NFL, because sometimes you just don't know about competition and all that other type of stuff, or just maturity levels. There's a lot of things that, go into getting a 17, 18-year-old kid to, take that talent and turn into an NFL player. So, I mean, I think Nebraska's doing that. And I like Rail. I liked when they got him committed, and I like the development path that he's on. If he wasn't trending up, maybe it would be a different conversation, but I think he's trending up in the right spot. And so, they've kind of committed to him. He's committed to them. And I don't think that that's going to change. I'd be really surprised if that changed.
The Bellevue West trio were can't miss prospects out of the state a couple of years ago, and now they're all no longer here. So, I mean, that's not to crap on them necessarily. That's just to say that a lot of these kids in state, once they start playing with the big boys and the bigger guys, maybe they're not as good as they were at the Nebraska high school level. So I do think there's a lot
And
of talent in this state, and I think there's a lot of talent in these. There has been a lot of talent over these last couple classes, but not everybody's going to pan out.
yeah, and we'll see, what that means for like Carter Nelson. I think this is a big year for him and how they're
Yeah,
going to utilize him. Um, but yeah, because he's kind of the next big one because Malachi left. So yeah, there's really not like a big in-state, guy, at least on offense. I mean, there's like Tyson Terry's coming in on defense. But
Christian
the
Jones. Yeah.
yeah, Christian Jones, yeah, that's a good one. But a lot of the stars have been in the state have been on the offensive side of the ball, and they haven't panned out too well. We did see Carter catch that touchdown pass last year, but they moved him around to receiver, and I don't even know where he's going to play this year. To be honest, they really haven't said. I'm assuming tight end, but they haven't really. They've been pretty tight-lipped on that. So I don't know. His development in year 2, I think, is going to be pretty important.
I agree, and I think it's time to take the training wheels off. I get that he actually did play a lot last year just on special teams, but I think it's time to take the training wheels off offensively and see what he can do. I know he had surgery at the very end of last season, and I'm very interested to see what he can kind of what he can bring to the table, because I think when you look at these skill positions, you're seeing a lot more out-of-state kids like Cortez Mills and Isaiah Mosey and guys like that. Even when we talked about some of the kids that are coming to visit in June, for example, a lot of them are from Georgia and Florida. So it's kind of interesting to see that shift towards the Georgia and Florida recruiting a little bit more, as opposed to maybe Nebraska and Texas, even Missouri. We talked about a lot. So it's kind of interesting to see where the recruiting board kind of falls and how the recruiting strategies kind of changed when they brought in guys like Philip Simpson and Jamar Mosey. So recruiting's not an exact science. So, but I think Nebraska's well positioned offensively, and I think they have a lot of talent on the defensive side of football too to be ready for the future.
Yeah, I think they've really looked at in-state is important, but I think that 500-mile radius that they're trying to, with Kansas City and St. Louis and,
That's a
Chicago
good
maybe
area.
trying to get into there. Even Kansas has the state of Kansas has some really good players too. So I think, trying to make sure that, any player that's like a blue chip from that area, has an offer from Nebraska or Nebraska's in the mix. I think that's really what they're trying to build. And, we'll see. I mean, they got, Juju Smith, Isaiah Mosey, like you said, they got Williams Nwaneri in the transfer portal, Jamarian Parker out of St. Louis. So they're starting to make inroads there. And I think that's going to be a really,
Dawson Merritt.
Dawson Merritt. So untapped. I think that's been an untapped, area for Nebraska. They're playing a game at Arrowhead this year, which I think just builds upon that, kind of reinforces, the brand Nebraska's trying to kind of establish in that Kansas City, Missouri area. And there's a ton of players there. I mean, you see it all the time. And if Nebraska can create a foothold in St. Louis and Kansas City and in Kansas, in addition to Nebraska, and then you cherry pick some guys from Florida and California, that's how you build a really successful program. And I think that they're, taking steps to do that. They just hired a pro personnel guy from the Patriots, which I think is only going to help with their transfer portal evaluations and their high school evaluations, which I think are already pretty good. So, I mean, they're doing everything that you want them to do. I mean, as a fan, everything that you should want them to do from a recruiting side, they're doing it. So, I mean, I think that's a big positive.
We've heard this story before. Now we just need to see the wins stack up. I mean, but I do think, all joking aside, I do think they are in a good position. And I think focusing on the Georgia, Florida, Missouri, Midwest areas are the smart play. And I think building that NFL staff, again, even the general manager acquisition last week, he came from the Patriots. All specified during the glory years, not the recent years, because Nebraska wouldn't want any guy connected to the Patriots right now. But, I think Matt Rule is trying to build an NFL-type team and an NFL-type staff. And I think that's forward thinking, too, because as much as fans don't want to hear it, this is like the NFL now. So, I mean, I think Nebraska's in a good position in that respect as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think they've got the right coaches. They just need to, get it done when it starts on the field there. So we'll see how that all works out. Quickly before we wrap up, the softball team, had a 3-2 weekend. So lost to Missouri, lost to Oklahoma State, but they did beat Missouri on Sunday. So they're still kind of cruising right along. Nebraska baseball, though, lost 2 out of 3 games. Won the opening game against Sam Houston State, and they did play second-ranked LSU, and they had a lead actually and blew it late. So the Tigers won that and then lost to Kansas State 9-6. And man, they have a tough time in these non-conference games, and that really, it makes it hard when you're trying to get like an at-large berth. So it seems like Nebraska again is probably going to have to, maybe win the Big Ten, not the Big Ten tournament necessarily, but probably be one of the top 2 teams in the regular season because their non-conference resume so far is not working out great.
Yeah, they've really struggled in these non-con games, and I'm hoping they can kind of fix, kind of identify what's wrong and fix it before Big Ten play. But right now, the non-conference schedule has just been tough sledding for them.
And so looking up at the schedule, it looks like Big Ten plays starting this week with we got Washington will be in Lincoln for a 3-game series this weekend. They play at Omaha and then home against South Dakota State, which is the first home game of the season on March 5th. And then Washington for 3 games, a couple games against Wichita State. But then basically getting right into the heart of the Big Ten schedule. So it'll be interesting to see how it works out. I mean, I think that they're off to a good start. I mean, they should be off to a better start, but I like what I've seen from the pitching staff, and they just need to put it together. So I'm not panicked yet. I still think that they're going to be one of the best teams in the Big Ten, but it would be nice to start getting some more non-conference wins so you don't have to rely on winning the conference to make the tournament.
They always start off slowly too, or at least under Will Bolt they have. So I'm not too worried yet, but there's been some instances where it's been really frustrating so far. So we'll see what happens, but I'm not ready to throw in the towel like some fans are. But again, they need to, really kind of have a strong week this week. I think it starts this week, and so it'll be interesting to see what happens, but I think they're very talented, and they should be able to make some noise within these next couple weeks here.
And I guess, the one thing, when you saw where they were ranked at the start of the season, you thought maybe if everything worked out right, they could be, kind of contending to host one of those super regionals. So, that I think that still should be a goal for this program. That's that's a top 16 seed. I don't think that's like crazy or not a super regional, but host a regional, excuse me. So, hopefully they can get there, and that would be a big step. But yeah, nothing to panic about so far. And, softball's cruising along, and I think everything's going along nicely there. Yeah, it's going to be an exciting spring. No spring football.
Women's basketball did well.
Yeah, women's basketball got a big win. They'll start the Big Ten tournament on, I think, Wednesday against Rutgers. I'd have to double check that. But anyways, Rutgers will be, their first round game. They're the 10 seed, but I think they should be in the tournament. If they win that game, then they'll really be locked into the NCAA tournament. So, but they destroyed Northwestern on Sunday, which was a good sign.
They did. Yeah, no, the women's team is taking care of business. I wish the men could do the same, but I'm happy for the ladies. They've had a difficult season in some aspects, but they managed to pull it together and kind of right the ship when it's needed to be righted. So
they have, and yeah, it's been disappointing without Natalie Potts, that she was hurt. So both Nebraska teams really, hurt by injuries this year to two of their best players, and Rink Masson for the men's team, Natalie Potts for the women's team. But hopefully they will both get dancing in March. We'll see what happens with Ohio State later this week, and we'll wrap it up there for this episode of the podcast. So thanks for hanging out with us. Please make sure you hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, get into the comment section, and as always, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.